Welcome to our revenge-taking channel. Let's start the story. The obvious choice is to fire a worthless high school dropout, right? Seeing my boss's smug grin, I clenched my teeth, biting my lip. The absurdity of potentially having to leave a company I've dedicated years to over such a ridiculous reason is outrageous. More than anything, the face of my daughter Sherry flashed in my mind. She used to tell me that I look so cool at work, her innocent smile lighting up her interest in my work. It began after an event the company organized called Family Day last year. For the first time, there was an event where families were invited to the company. It was an occasion to see the typically unseen working parents and children and learn about their jobs. Sherry also participated. The first time Sherry saw me operating heavy machinery at work, she seemed to think I looked really cool. The Family Day event was scheduled for next month. Sherry was really looking forward to Family Day. It was such unfortunate timing for all of this to happen. I've been working as a construction worker for this company since I was in high school. It's the same company where my father used to work. My father passed away in an accident over 10 years ago. After my father passed away and life began just for my mother, my younger brother, and sister, my mother gradually lost her spirit and energy. She started to lose weight and couldn't work long hours anymore. Seeing her like that, I took up a part-time job at the same company. I admired my father for even then. What I earned wasn't enough, so I quit high school before my senior year to work full-time. Around the time my younger brother and sister started working, I married a man and had a child. However, a few years later, we got divorced. His infidelity was the reason. By that time, my daughter Sherry, who was just 3 years old, and my mother, who had somewhat recovered, and I started living together. And Sherry is 7 years old. I'm often busy with work, and I worry that she might feel lonely, but she always tells me that she thinks I'm cool. Even though we aren't wealthy, our family lived happily. Well, if there's a problem in my life, it's probably our site supervisor. He's not liked at our workplace. He belittles others and always puts the blame for his mistakes on someone else. That's just the kind of guy he is. He apparently made up some report to the main office again. David, one of my juniors, grumbled during lunch break one day. The other day, I heard the main office was upset because they thought our machine inspection was insufficient. But the thing is, we all did our inspections properly and even submitted the report to Ken. It's just that Ken forgot to check and report it to the headquarters. Now the main office thinks we on the ground skipped our checks. Can you believe that? You hear such complaints everywhere on the site. Everyone's frustrated with that site supervisor. I think you would be a better site supervisor. Hearing that, I almost spat out. Mighty me? Yeah, you're reliable, and you actually pay attention to us. I was surprised when you got your heavy machinery license. Even with a daughter to care for, Mason, who was eating his lunch, raised an eyebrow in agreement. You're definitely different than us. Laughter filled the break area. Tough, manly, that's what people often say about me here. Not that I'm trying to be, but chasing after the image of my admired father, I seem to have naturally become that way. Well, Ken calls me a useless high school dropout, so who knows? Hearing Ken's mockery of me, David's face tightened. It's only Ken who cares about educational background. That's not what's important here. The other workers nodded in agreement. Such reactions made me feel both pleased and awkward, so I just laughed it off. I've been troubled by Ken's tyranny for many years now. His behavior has caused many to quit. Just when I started thinking seriously about what measures to take, that incident happened. Hey, get the work moving already. Hustle, hustle. When handling heavy machinery, we can't neglect even a single inspection. It'll be too late if there's an accident. When I voiced my opinion to Ken, who was hurrying the work, a vein popped on his forehead. A high school dropout like you, pointing out to me. So how are you going to explain the delay in the schedule? I swallowed the words I was about to say. Isn't it your fault to begin with? Ken had a reason for rushing. The construction schedule was significantly delayed. Turns out Ken had misread the schedule, causing a delay right from the beginning of the work. Soon, the client who had commissioned the condominium was planning to visit to see the progress, and he was desperately trying to make up for the delay. By that day, we can't cause an accident or do a shoddy job. The safety and peace of mind of the people who will live in this condominium are at stake. When I spoke in a stern tone, Ken's face turned bright red and he began to get angry. "I'm in charge here, you know, don't defy me. Then you take responsibility, all right?" In his rage, Ken stormed off. No matter how angry he might be, I couldn't just compromise the quality of construction. If a flawed building affected its future residents, I couldn't be proud in front of my admired father. That's the kind of work I never wanted to do. A few days later, a representative from the client company came to inspect the construction site. He had already heard about the delay in the schedule from the main office, but seeing the site firsthand, he was furious. He left saying he would demand an explanation through the main office. When asked for an explanation, Ken falsely claimed that the on-site workers had been dawdling, and it seemed he pointed me out as the main culprit. Hearing such rumors, I didn't pay much attention. I was used to Ken's antics. However, an incident that couldn't be overlooked happened shortly after. Violet, one day out of the blue, Ken called me into the office. Seeing a smug grin, a sinking feeling came over me. The head office has suggested a complete overhaul of our team to avoid mistakes like the previous one. From the system to the personnel, they want to review everything. If they were truly going to reevaluate from the ground up, they should start by replacing the site supervisor. That would be ideal. If, however, the kind of review he was talking about wouldn't lead to such changes, so, Violet, you're fired. I involuntarily let out a "what?" as the words took me by surprise. I didn't quite grasp what he had just told me. You know, it makes sense to first let go of the less competent ones, right? Ken continued with that smug look on his face. With you around, the work just drags on and never progresses. The real reform is about getting rid of unnecessary employees. I've heard that the head office is going to send over some talented new staff they recently brought on, so we don't need someone as incompetent as you. I was at a loss for words. It seemed like this man was trying to push his mistakes onto me and get rid of me as an obstacle. The face of my daughter, Sherry, flashed in my mind. The family day she's been looking forward to is just next month. I couldn't accept being forced out of a company where my father also worked just because of such a reason. I only suggested measures to ensure that the construction proceeds safely and that once the apartments are used, there are no issues. I can't accept being fired for that. My daughter, Sherry, is really looking forward to the upcoming family day. Who needs someone who goes against the site supervisor? I don't care about your daughter. I bet she's just as dumb as you, right? I could feel my bottled-up anger breaking free, intuitively feeling that I couldn't work under this man who insulted my daughter. I snapped back. All right, then I quit and stormed out of the room. Behind me, I heard Ken yelling, "Pack up your stuff and hand over your tasks quickly." Even when I got home that day, I couldn't immediately tell Sherry about what had happened. How could I explain to Sherry, who was excited about visiting my workplace, that Mom got fired? "Hey, Mom," about the upcoming family day. A few days later, after dinner, Sherry brought it up. I hesitated for a moment, then faced Sherry. "Sherry, you see," I tried to explain as gently and clearly as I could. Sherry listened intently with a solemn expression. Once I finished, she paused for a moment and then said in a surprisingly mature tone, "Well, if that's the case, it can't be helped. Aren't you upset about the family day being canceled?" Without hesitation, she made a pouty face and replied, "Of course I am, but you're going to work somewhere else, right? You won't quit doing construction jobs, will you?" "No, I think I'll continue in civil engineering," she nodded, seemingly content with my answer. "Then I'm okay." Her straightforward response left me wondering if perhaps she was more mature than I was. But that night I heard soft sobs coming from Sherry's room. I stood frozen outside her door, wondering if she was trying not to worry me. The thought tightened a knot in my chest. At work, my colleagues regretted my departure. There were even some who directly pleaded with Ken on my behalf, saying that work wouldn't go smoothly without me. However, they were all rejected, and apparently some were even threatened with, "Do you want to be fired too?" Feeling I couldn't put my coworkers into more trouble, all I could do was smile and assure them everything was okay. Then came my last day at the office. Having already handed over most of my responsibilities and taken a few days off, I returned to the site after a 2-day break. I greeted David and my other colleagues before heading to the office where Ken was. Honestly, I didn't even want to greet him, but I thought if I have to see him, I might as well get a good job in. Just then, I ran into Ken as he was leaving his office. Seeing me, Ken grinned in what seemed like delight. "Ah, today's your last day, huh? I'm relieved I won't have to work with a dropout like you anymore." I was about to snap back at him when an unfamiliar voice interjected. Ken, surprised, I turned around to see a young man I didn't recognize standing there. "Oh, I'm sorry, did I interrupt something?" He looked back and forth between Ken and me with a puzzled expression, his eyebrows furrowed. "It's okay, Nate. What's up?" Hearing Ken address him so familiarly, I realized he must be Nate Anderson, the talented new staff who had replaced me. He had supposedly started just the day before yesterday. Nate glanced briefly in my direction and asked, "Are you Violet by any chance?" "Yes, I am." "I thought so. I've heard you're very thorough and reliable at your job, but I also heard you're leaving." From the way he hesitated and looked between Ken and me, it seemed he might have heard from colleagues about the circumstances leading to my resignation. Ken, looking pleased, pointed at me with his chin and snickered. "That's right, incompetent high school dropouts like her get fired. If you slack off, I'll fire you in no time." Ken's words made me feel my face heating up. Neither I nor my colleagues have ever done a sloppy job. When I glared at Ken, he shot back with a stern, "Not a problem." With that, I was about to voice all my grievances since it was my last day, but just then Nate let out a sigh. "Ken, you're the one who's getting fired." Both Ken and I were shocked and turned to look at Nate. Ken, taken aback by Nate's words, quickly reverted to his usual demeanor and yelled, "Youngster, what the hell are you blabbering about?" Then Nate pulled out something small from his pocket and waved it for us to see. "It's a recording device. Over the past few days, I've been recording your interactions with the staff. CEO Anderson has already listened to these recordings." Ken's face turned pale upon hearing Nate's words. Something didn't sit right with me as I mulled over what Nate just said. Nate said that CEO Anderson has listened to the recordings. Anderson is a common surname, but something about that coincidence felt odd. Seeing me lost in thought, Nate gave a warm smile. "Yes, the CEO is my father." Nate's revelation left us stunned, and he began to explain. "Actually, when I first joined this company, I started out as a field worker. After getting used to the field, I was called in by CEO Anderson, his father. The reason was a request to check out another site, but that request had another underlying meaning. It was primarily to investigate Ken, who already had a bad reputation. After observing the team for a few days, Nate discovered that Ken was being abusive and exerting excessive authority. He had already handed over evidence to the CEO. This site had a history of minor issues like equipment malfunctions, but after working here and seeing Ken's sloppy work constantly being covered by the rest of the team, it all made sense. I believe it's thanks to everyone that we haven't had any major accidents. I sunk and paled at the truth revealed by Nate. Nate continued, "The delays in the construction schedule for the apartment building were also said to be Ken's fault by the workers, and there were suspicious points in the schedule management table. There were also many testimonies about severe abusive behaviors from him. I really wonder who's the unnecessary one in this construction site. I expect the CEO will soon issue a formal termination notice. On hearing those words, Ken suddenly began to breathe heavily. He seemed like he wanted to retort, opening and closing his mouth repeatedly, but maybe because he was addressing the CEO's son, he ultimately said nothing and shook with tension. Ignoring Ken's reaction, Nate turned to me as I was standing there in shock. It's gotten to this point because we at the headquarters didn't manage things properly. I deeply apologize. If you would forgive us and consider it, would you come back? Everyone at the site said it was you who held this team together. We truly need you here. Watching the earnest young man apologize so sincerely, I involuntarily swallowed hard. In truth, I had been hoping to continue working here if it were possible. Seeing a sincere attitude, I slowly nodded in agreement. Mommy, hearing Sherry's voice slightly louder than usual, I turned around and waved. Surrounded by my colleagues, Sherry seemed utterly delighted, basking in the attention. It's been a month since then. Today was Sherry's long-awaited family day. Walking towards the beaming Sherry, I could feel my heart pounding. After that incident, just as Nate had said, Ken was indeed terminated from his position. On the other hand, I was able to return to that site. A new site supervisor was assigned from the headquarters, and Nate has started working at our site as a rookie without making a fuss about being the CEO's son. Nate blended in seamlessly. Reaching Sherry, she ran up and jumped into my arms. You know, the guys said you're cool, Mom. They said you'd probably become a supervisor real soon. Hugging the smiling Sherry, I couldn't help but give a wry smile. Recently, I was approached by the headquarters about potentially becoming a site supervisor. Right now, I'm diligently studying to get the necessary certification. I wonder if I can do it. I need to work hard. You can do it 'cause you're Mommy. Hearing Sherry's words, I found myself close to tears.